Hello, welcome to SonarFeed, episode 275. Cristian for goal of the week. Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot of episodes.
Yes.
We've got the clap gallery hanging out, which is kind of nice.
Oh, I guess we should introduce ourselves.
Who? Us?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I'm Mickey Turner, Turner ESQ on the Twitters.
Do you have like 92 internet handles right now?
Only 3?
Oh, okay. Cool.
3? Yeah. I think
Anyway,
it's only
and I'm Tom Biro, a.k.a. Bougie Hooli, or probably like 9 other things.
yeah. How many internet handles do you have?
A lot. I'm not going to admit to like 13 of them. So
Yeah.
I still don't write for Nutmeg News, though, contrary to popular belief.
Yes. It's a very it's a big mystery out there. The crowd still does not believe you.
They don't. Nor will they ever.
Yeah.
I turned up the audio, so let me know if it doesn't get any better. We could just yell. Let's not do that.
I'd rather not do that.
We could yell so loud that Ugo would hear us. Or not. Anyway, what's going on?
Not too much. It's been a while.
We haven't had a
Been a
show
long
in
time.
like a number of weeks.
I'd say nigh on a month.
I trusted y'all to have a show while I was in Austin, Texas, and it did not happen.
It was not even close to happening.
So we, everybody's complaining. I mean, thanks,
Yes.
and by everybody I mean John. He's telling me to talk louder, so we'll make it happen.
We'll try to do that.
Anyway, I turned up the gain significantly. Hopefully that will adapt accordingly.
Or blow out people's ears who are using headphones.
Anyway, so we've got a bunch of things to talk about. So 1, 2, 3, 4 Sounders matches, I think, since the last show, because we had met after the away leg of the LAFC,
yeah.
right? The drubbing, if you will.
Yeah.
And then we had San Jose, and then LAFC at home, and then Minnesota United. And then I would love to just say United, but like half the league is a United.
I'm sure we'll have a couple more
in MLS
by
right now.
it's
Yeah.
over.
And then obviously this weekend's match versus Dynamo at home. So a lot of match stuff to talk about, some injury stuff to talk about, some player movement stuff to talk about, some Tacoma Defiance goal differential stuff we could talk about, or just mention right now and never speak of it again. Game of Thrones things we could talk about, training stuff we could talk about. I feel like there are so many things we could talk about.
You may have to bring someone else up here for the Game of Thrones discussion, seeing as I've never seen an episode in my life.
It actually makes it more fun if you haven't seen any episodes, and then I just like bring up random things that could potentially have happened on Game of Thrones at some point that aren't real. We should make this a game on this show. There's this English sports talk radio station that I've been listening to, and they do this, and it's something like Eastern European, like 3rd or 4th tier team, or
Dragon.
like Star Wars planet, or it's something like that. And I have to tell you, the people get it wrong 90% of the time.
Sounds about right.
It's pretty amazing.
That actually does sound quite entertaining.
So let's start with the positives. So super recent Sounders match. Not honestly the best game we've ever seen.
Yeah, I thought it was entertaining, but
That was a banger of a goal
Yes.
from Roldan. And it was fun to watch it from... Were you in the press booth?
Yes,
You are.
I actually
So,
made it in time to see the goal.
From the other end, and I was in a spot, I was in 121, where like you saw the ball come back out, and I intentionally looked up at the screen and watched it happen. And again, we watch Elise miss the net like 978 times, sometimes really, really poorly, but to be able to volley that ball where it went, let alone do it at all, was fantastic.
Yeah, it was an incredible goal. It probably topped his one from last week, maybe. I'm not sure because they were both pretty fantastic. But obviously great close control, chested down, lets it bounce, takes the volley. And nice courtesy dive from the
Yeah.
Houston goalkeeper who was not getting to that in a million years. But
think about how many times we have seen that happen where that thing doesn't even become a volley shot. It just gets like stepped back and passed off or whatever, and then maybe never even turns into a shot at all.
Or you
because the
drag it
defenders
wide.
Yeah. You know, it was just really great headspace for him to do what he did. It was like 1, 2, 3 steps, just like really, really perfect.
Yeah, and now he's up for goal of the week, and
Which is kind of neat. The link is in the description for the show, so go hit that up.
Yeah.
I don't know if we necessarily really need to stack this right now, but knowing MLS Reddit, there will be some other goal that someone decides that they need to
goose the numbers
to push
for.
on, if you will. But I'm not really concerned about it.
Yeah.
Because it was a banger.
Yeah, and turned out to be the winner, obviously. Their finishing wasn't as much better than Houston's, but it was good enough on the day. And it was nice to see Roldan providing some offense, continuing to provide some offense. How many is it? His 4th goal this year?
Not even sure. I'm going to look while we are sitting
because he's
here.
got obviously 2 in the last 2 games. I feel like he has he's got 3 for sure that I know of, and I feel like he may have 4. So it's good to see him kind of pick up the slack while they've been a little short at the forward position, and now that they're not so short, he won't necessarily be relied on to do that. But it's good to know that he's got that kind of thing in his arsenal to help the team out when when they're not at full strength, which once again they are not because they unfortunately lost Victor Rodriguez.
3 goals, by the way.
3 goals.
Rolled on.
Okay. So they unfortunately lost Victor Rodriguez early in the game to a hamstring. Not that they of course have some depth now going forward, which I'm sure we'll talk about here in a bit.
Nah,
but,
we're not going to touch that.
But again, it's good to see that they've got another option there, especially since Rui Diaz is still kind of rounding back into form after missing a month.
So
same with Bruin, although he missed a little less time.
So just talking about the rest of that game, which frankly kind of like the LAFC match, a lot of stuff happened.
Yeah, and then
there was like a, oh my God, are we going to survive all the way to this match?
Yeah.
Because Houston isn't exactly a slouch as clubs go right now. Great fortitude for the team to not hang on, like as in it was you were getting punished all match, but to get through and be consistent, frankly, for the rest of the match.
Yeah, it was kind of a grind, I would say. They weren't ever out of control of the match, and as you said, they weren't necessarily on the verge of getting punished. There were a couple of obviously chances
for sure
that Fry came up big for, but that would have just if worse happens, that ties the game. If he gives up a goal.
That header into the ground was almost like he was almost too open. But I have to tell you, there were a couple, 3 for sure, that I was like goal. Like you saw it coming. I had somebody this morning say to me, they were like, how is that game not 4-4? Just because of the randomness that was occurring up and down.
Yeah, Ladero hit the crossbar. They had a couple of otherwise great chances that probably should have at least been put on frame, and it was just kind of one of those games where their finishing kind of left them, and it happens. And I think that's just a combination of just again being one of those games and having a DP forward who hadn't essentially played in a month. He got some time against Minnesota, but it was nominal time.
Right.
So he he's still working back his fitness and his understanding with his teammates, and Morris probably could have done better with the chance he had.
Yep.
As well, but they got the win. So
I feel like
it's tough to really complain too much.
Jordan missing and then laying down on the ground, like putting his hands on his head.
He probably needs to stop that.
Again, he's got 4 goals, so let's take it. But you brought up Rui Diaz, not in name but in concept. Let's maybe talk about him being subbed off, and don't spill that.
Yes. Yeah, that would be a disaster.
Some of that vibe, which I would say I've talked to people that were in three or 4 different areas in the stadium, and they all noticed it. The lack of hitting the sub and being like, hey, whatever, and just his clear frustration with the moment. And I think the question a lot of people have been asking is like, was that him just being frustrated himself for a miss, or just I didn't want to get subbed out in that moment?
Obviously after the game, Schmetzer said it was nothing. He was fine. I would chalk it up to a combination of not wanting to come out, but more so, and him not producing anything, and not getting the ball enough to make, to try to have some chances on goal. Because I don't know if he had any chances on goal or shots on goal in that game. I'd have to go back and look at the stats, but if he did, it was maybe one or two. And so that is what I would chalk up that frustration to. I can't imagine that there's a major problem. He was fine at training today, joking around with the team, and they were doing some fun drills. He was right in the middle of everything. So I can't imagine that there's actually a problem there. He's overwhelmingly likely to start both games unless they decide to rotate him. At worst, he comes off the bench or only gets a little bit of time in one of the games if they try to save him for both. But I think that's just probably looking a little bit too deeply into the frustrations of a player who didn't really get on the ball enough. So I wouldn't worry about it.
So we're not going to worry about it.
Yeah.
We're just going to move on because he's a professional who knows what he's doing. It was just interesting. And not that we haven't seen like energy or not negativity, but like some juice behind him since he's been here. It was a little bit borderline
glaring.
Out of character in the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important part. And as much as I get Schmetzer, who's a man of his word, but at the same time is there to tamp down.
Yeah, he's protecting his players.
Things,
I'm sure.
Is never going to make a big deal about it. But when that was a decent amount of discussion yesterday, whether you were on the internet or talking to people offline, there were some concerns about it. But at the same time, like high performing player, been out for a hot minute, comes in, maybe expects to either get more touches or just rough up Houston. Didn't do either.
Yeah. And again, Houston's a good team this year. I don't see any reason why they won't be in the playoffs unless they sell both of their top players. And I'm sure we can talk about Elise versus Brad Smith here as well. But again, barring them selling one of their top players, they should be there in the playoffs. They may not be at the top of the conference because I think they're still lacking in some areas. But given the rest of kind of the 8 through 12 in the Western Conference, it's hard to see that they're not going to be there. So they're a good team, and they've got a lot of attacking weapons, and they're not just the bunker and counter team anymore.
Yeah. Sounders feel real good at home right now, even with like a tricky game against LAFC a couple weeks back. That's great because they've had moments over the last few years where you're like, home wasn't quite as good cooking as you might have liked.
Yeah, they were averaging probably 4 losses at home over the last few years.
Again, feels real solid right now. It's a really weird thing to say. Not that they haven't been good ever. Mm-hmm. It feels really nice to have taken out Houston.
Yeah.
You feel good about it as opposed to
it's
be
a good win.
Houston, who cares? Yeah. Like this feels like, you knocked off somebody who's been running.
And they've now they have a couple of quality wins over the last month. Toronto, obviously, although they've kind of struggled a little bit recently. And then you've got obviously Houston, and they've got a big game this weekend, which again we'll talk about after we talk about Orlando, I'm sure. And so it's nice to see them get some wins over some more established competition, and I'm sure that does wonders for their confidence. And there's just some things they need to tighten up. And on that note, it's good to see the defense pitching a shutout, and not giving up nearly as many goals. I think they've only given up 2 goals in the last 3 games.
Well, especially when we're mix and match is too harsh, but especially when we've been changing things from week to week from a center back standpoint for sure, but occasionally on the outside as well due to disciplinary or injuries or whatever the heck it's been. So,
Yeah.
on that note, while we're talking about defenders, every so often, Brad Smith ends up with a cross that you watch it live and you're like, that's amazing. And then you go back and watch the replay and you're like, that was 10x better than I thought it was. And I was at a picnic yesterday for Mother's Day and was talking to someone who was at the game. And I was like, he's getting called back, isn't he? Because dude looks real good. And like, we can get into the moves or, the
potential
moves that
moves.
may have been part of this in a second. But the way, like, he just looks different when he's in the groove than so many outside backs in MLS, like league-wide over a decade.
Yeah.
Like, he stands out.
The difference
for so many people.
Is definitely noticeable, his quality. We had the benefit of having probably the best left back in the league leave us, and he came off, a couple of fantastic seasons, and then they were, they got by with Nuhu.
Yep.
For a year. Who else? And I'm forgetting who else they had a left back in 2018 before Smith got there. It's escaping me. And so they got by for about 6 months before Smith came in, and then he was actually never there really.
Yeah.
Because he was injured. But you saw the flashes of quality, obviously, when he was with the team and healthy. And then this year he's been healthy, and it's just incredible. He's great going forward. He's got some tricks in his bag. He can cross the ball. He's obviously ridiculously fast.
Yeah.
And he combines well. At the start of the season, him, Rui Diaz, and Rodriguez were doing things that were just incredible.
Well, and that's the part that I think is interesting. Like, it's one thing to be able to blast beautiful crosses in all day long. It's a whole nother thing to, like, actually have the read and the chem, especially when you look at top flight teams in any league, where you see the players already getting in the air before the person boots the cross, and it's just like they see it. Yeah. And the chem is there, the connection's there, whatever you want to call it. And I do feel like he and the forwards, or even the mids, there's some linkage there that's very, very unspoken, and it's really, really interesting to watch.
Yeah, and it's going to be a chore or a test this summer to keep him. His loan is up at the end of July, right before the start of the EPL season. And I'm not so sure that he's getting recalled because, again, he's another level for MLS, but that doesn't mean you're an EPL player necessarily.
Right, for sure.
And I don't, obviously the Sounders are doing their best to keep him. They're talking with his agent. His agent was out here a couple of weeks ago, and I'm sure they've been talking since. And we don't. The reporting is that his purchase clause, which the Sounders have, they could just cut a check to Bournemouth at X dollars and bring Smith in permanently, assuming they could reach a contract deal. But the problem there is that the purchase price is going to make him a DP. And probably a DP, so not one that you can buy down with TAM. And that is something they're not going to do because they have other plans for
you mean DP
slot.
Left back's probably not going to be a thing for a hot minute?
Yeah. I don't think for the foreseeable future.
MLS is going to be like, no?
Yeah, most likely. So there's that. And if they're not going to do that, then what are Bournemouth's options if they don't want to keep him? His contract's up in about a year, basically, the end of the summer 2020, or the start of summer 2020. So his contract's up then. He can sign a pre-contract with someone in January, essentially, to go wherever he wants. So it's not like they can really hold out for a ton of money,
right?
But the money that they could hold out, an EPL player, even one who's marginal, is still going to cost you several $1 million in a transfer fee, and they paid $6 million to get him in the first place, and I'm sure they're going to try to recoup that to some degree. So you've got that issue, you've got his salary, and it's going to be tough to do, and I don't think it's necessarily because Bournemouth is desperate to call him back in. but if he continues to play like this, maybe he becomes part of their plans. But I'm fairly skeptical. Maybe it's just because the historic bias against MLS players going to England and Europe, even though he's not. He didn't come from here, but he has been here for a while now, and so I don't think it's the recall issue that's the problem. I think it's a financial issue, and I don't know and I don't think that Bournemouth's holding out to gouge the Sounders or come with some unreasonable price, or that they have someone else necessarily that they can sell him to. It's just that there is a number that they would likely want to get to at least recoup some of that money, and I don't think he's the player that they just want to wash their hands of and basically have the Sounders say, all right, you take him, be gone. We just want him off our books. But
so if you placed a bet right now, is he here in August?
I think he is. I think they'll have a middle ground where they extend his loan to January.
Okay.
And so that gets him through this season, this total season with the Sounders, and then they'll work on trying to get him here full time, because I think the Sounders would love to have him back, and I think he'd like to stay on a long-term deal. But again, the other issue there is he currently makes about $1.3 million, which is tamable, but it's still pretty high. So you don't necessarily have to have him take much of a pay cut, but
right,
you're going to be using a lot of TAM to bring him down. So you might be able to get him to on a 4-year deals, so he's got some stability, and they can keep him and then still TAM him down, and then they will. That may be able to get the job done. And then there's also, we're not going to get into this. We'll get into this later, but the CBA is up at the end of the year, and so
which is a whole nother conversation.
But at least as far as Smith is concerned, and the other transactions that again we'll talk about, Garth joked that he's hopeful that the salary cap will go up with the new collective bargaining agreement, and it's not just because of all of the moves they've made in the last few days.
Yeah.
It's because I'm sure they'd like to be able to spread out some of this, their salary spends.
So this is probably a good point to bridge into moves that the Sounders have made before we talk about some other recap things and then some look forward stuff.
Yeah.
So a couple moves. One, which is maybe most relevant to this discussion, Jovan Jones back in town.
Yeah.
Ozzy Alonso, very on top of commenting on that shit on the internet, because heaven forbid he doesn't have to he's like I'm still, talking to my ex-girlfriend from 8th grade's parents because they like me the best. Like, it's that level stalkiness, and it's actually not great. It's awkward.
Well, yeah, that is certainly the case.
He's on top of it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, don't you have, I don't know, literally anything else to do than this? Instagram. Yeah. It was awkward, and I love him. Amazing player. Cannot take anything away, but 11 out of 3 grudginess. Wow. But just diving in, Jovan Jones, we can talk all day probably about how he left in the first place. We know there's a lot of the weird MLS machinations with trying to pay him, trying to pay Fry, what he wanted, what he didn't, whether he was in the right headspace to frankly be on Sounders. Mm-hmm. There was the national team stuff for him. There was all sorts of things.
His sabbatical.
Sounders were like, oh, okay. I don't know if we all truly mutually decided to do what happened. But dude stepped away for a hot minute, clearly wanted to come back this whole time, is now back. And I think, again, I'm just fueling speculation in my comments a few minutes ago. Was this more of a Brad Smith conversation than a pro-Jovan conversation, or is it all of the above? And it sounds like your take is it's all of the above.
Yeah, I'm writing a story for Sounder Heart. I need to
is that sounderatheart.com?
Yes, .com.
Oh, okay.
That will hopefully drop by the end of the week. I have one more interview to do, but but it basically goes behind the scenes, like how they got these deals done. And from what I can tell, I think they have been in contact with Joven for since he left, essentially.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking like every 2 weeks or anything like that, but they were checking in every 4 or 5 months just to see what's going on. And there was definitely a plan or a thought to bring him back. I shouldn't say a plan. What is pretty funny is that they definitely were not planning on having it done this window by any stretch of the imagination. And so I talked to Garth for the story, and he had a couple of pretty funny anecdotes. And it's, there's definitely some serendipity with the deal, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And they did a lot of work to get not only Joven but Arriaga done and get them over the finish line. And get them to comply with the MLS various rules. Because as you referenced, they tried to keep them around last time, and that didn't go so well. They've gone to great pains not to talk about that unpleasantness.
Yeah, and that's fine.
In part because they've got to work with the MLS compliance folks on XYZ number of deals. And going out there and trashing them is not the best way to get, not a favor, but get some better understanding with the league. So they've definitely gone out of their way not to, trash the league, to say they screwed us and we tried to bring Jones in initially and they basically put the kibosh on it. And so they got this thing done in about 10 days. From the end of the transfer window, both deals done. So it was definitely a mad rush to get both of the deals done. So look for that story. But that's kind of the background of what happened there. So it's a bit of luck for them, some hard work, and now they've got yet another left back / left mid who can cover in the event that Brad Smith and they're not able to get Smith done, or their other left back gets sold, because that is certainly a possibility this summer that Nuhu may be headed for other pastures, because I think he wants to. I mean, I don't think he's dying to go like, get me out of here this minute, but I think
there's clearly some
ready. He wants to explore some other some European options. And now again, Jones is definitely a left mid at this point. That's where he played for our Darmstadt for the year and a half he was there. Or I guess a year and a half, we'll just round up. He was a left mid the entire time he was there. And again, the Sounders have two left backs now that are more than serviceable. And they may be a little thin at the left mid, depending on how Rodriguez. How Rodriguez's MRI comes back.
He's not on the field in front of Rodriguez unless Rodriguez is hurt.
I don't think they see. He's going to have to come in, and we're going to have to come and see where he's at. He was really good for Darmstadt last year. He nearly saved them from relegation on his own. I mean, he was really that good. This year he was not as good, and I think there were a number of issues related to that. I think some of it has to do with him being far from home. Even though Seattle to Trinidad and Tobago is not that much closer than Germany, but he is certainly more familiar with the United States and was certainly homesick, I think, to some degree. So whatever the reason he wasn't as productive for them this year, both sides are ready to move on, and that was obviously to the Sounders' benefit. And you're right, I don't see him necessarily overtaking Rodriguez at this point. They have they have different skill sets entirely,
for sure,
which is not a bad thing. But
like it plans ahead for a lot of things, whether it's Nuhu, whether it's Smith, whether it's Rodriguez is hurt for an extended period of time. Which, to be honest, Rodriguez has been hurt for an extended period of time over his entire time at Sounders.
And let's also keep in mind that his contract is up at the end of the year, and the Sounders have an option for him. And it's certainly up in the air whether they would exercise that. Jones is probably not making nearly what Rodriguez is. He's probably making, 60 cents on the dollar to Rodriguez.
Well, yeah, and Rodriguez is, and I was just peeking at the story from Jeremiah. It was like he's effectively a DP or whatever.
Yeah, he makes like 1.1
Yeah.
million. So he's a lot to buy down. So Jones, you figure Jones is maybe around 600,000 or so, and so that is an option for them next year if Rodriguez they think is going to be overly injured, and he is 30. I think he'll be 31 next year, give or take. And for someone of his stature and with his injury history, maybe the Sounders don't want to spend $1.2 million on a left mid who's going to be injured. And so, Jovan Jones is a pretty good replacement in that situation, even though, again, what I would want to see is how, and I'm sure the Sounders want to see, is what his interaction and interplay is with Rui Diaz and Smith.
Yeah.
Because, again, at the beginning of the season, you had that triumvirate that was just wrecking people. And you just want to see how Jones is able to interact with those guys. So I think if he's able to really, get in there and provide something dynamic, then maybe they have a tough decision to make in the offseason.
Again, good. Like, I'll take that decision all day.
Yeah.
But I think there's a little bit of over the next month or so, and we've got a break and some other things going on. Let's get them all healthy for a minute, and then roll for a while. And I think some of the comments that I had peeked at from Garth were like, "Oh, we really weren't planning on doing this right now. It just kind of happened." And you used the word, I think, serendipitous. Like, cool. Like, I'm all here for this. And it did work out, especially now. Like, it's going to be a hot minute. And Eileen asked in the chat, like, when are we going to get to see these players on the field? And I know there's visa stuff and other things.
I would say not before the end of June. That's my.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that
because I don't think they're going to be here until. I don't think they're going to be here in the next 2 weeks. I think it'll be close to that, but they're certainly not going to be here this week.
So not even here for that Impact match.
When is
the 5th of June?
That is, I think
again,
that's
this is a lot of away, and then it's home. And
well,
I could totally see them being like, we're just going to wait till after the window, weave them in then.
Yep, I think that's likely, more likely than not, but you're talking maybe 45% percentages. And I think it's just because, again, they're coming off full seasons.
Right.
They have the visa issues that are going to take a few weeks to settle anyway. Then Jones is going to be away with Trinidad and Tobago for the Gold Cup. I think Arriaga's got something going on in South America as well. I could be wrong on that. I might be wrong on that. But in his case, he's coming to a country he's never been before to live.
Yep.
And so he's got acclimation things that they want to get into. And I think I would not undersell the fact that these moves were unlikely to happen until about a week before the transfer deadline was going to close. That that's not to say that they weren't doing anything and they're just sitting on their butts, but these deals came into play in a real way 10 days a week before the transfer window.
So figuring that out is honestly the least of the concerns. Yeah. And Jeremiah did play every possible card. It was like the most middle of the road thing he could say, which was neither will be available before May 26th, but it could be June 29th. Also, maybe not till July 14th when they play Atlanta. And I'm like, oh, you picked literally every possible 2 to 3 week period between now and mid July.
Some of it has to do with the Gold Cup. And
for sure.
And Trinidad and Tobago's not. They're in a bit of a down cycle, I think. So whether they get out of their group is a question. If they don't get out of the group, then Jones will be here earlier. Again, I don't know Arriaga's national team status, and also one thing that will make it more likely that he's there early or back here early is he doesn't have a whole lot of caps for the Ecuadorian national team. Yeah, I think it's one. So if they decide he's ready to come in and take more of a detailed look at him, then maybe he goes. But based on his previous trajectory, it's not quite his time yet.
So if you're to bet money right now, end of June,
I think end of June is. I think they'll be here at some point before the start of June, because the Sounders are going to want to do the intro and get all the pictures and do the pressers and all that fun stuff. So they'll be here for sure, and they'll be training at some point for sure. But whether we see them in an actual match before the end of June is it's probably 50-50 at best at the moment. But again, there's a few things that we don't know at this point. But again, I would stress that these deals were, it was something to get them over the line, and these were things that they were not on this level. We're not expecting to have.
As somebody who's been super bitchy about moves for the last 3 seasons, I was like, I like Jovan Jones. Also, center backs from South America that are the captain of their squad, I will accept these moves as tribute. Like, yes, please.
Yeah, so I don't think people should get too hung up on that issue, especially given the Sounders are off to a good start and they have plenty of depth at both of those positions right now, and that can get them through to June. Knock on wood, barring a SKC like injury catastrophe.
There was a good meme about that today. It was really funny. It was basically like
that's
SKC training room, and it was just a whole bunch of people in hospital beds.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's just I guess get sidetracked. That's just been some of the craziest stuff. And we thought the Sounders had dire injury issues. I don't think they ever, even last year when they were just in a triage room, ever were not fielding a full 18. Maybe they had a 17 at some point, but they were fielding more than 14.
Sounders did have 17 a couple weeks ago. They had that 16 versus Colorado, which I was like, we're going to win this game, right? Yeah. The away at Colorado. Was it
last year?
Last year, 2 seasons ago? I can't remember. Yeah. Fielded 16. I'm like,
this is not
Are
good.
we a top flight team or not? Like, what exactly happened?
But 14 you literally have 3 outfield players that the only subs you can use are the ones that are there. And that's all, you only need 14 players, I suppose.
For sure.
But,
just a little nuts. But so we touched briefly on training for a hot second, and I had seen you had checked in this morning, and I was like, oh, what's happening at training? What's going on? Any other kind of insights or things you learned today?
Not really. Svensson is
what the hell, Mickey?
Yeah, I know. I apologize. No, actually, Svensson's getting really close. He looks like he's cutting and running and doing some fairly high impact stuff. He's not training with the team yet, so I don't want anybody to say he's going to be back this week. But I can see him back in the next 2 weeks or so.
I was in the stadium at 4 on Saturday to do some things, and we saw him out on the field a little bit, just doing a couple things, not even for a huge amount of time. And it was clearly like, let's see how this feels to you. You're on the turf, try some stuff.
He's definitely ramping up, so that's definitely good news. Rodriguez, like I said, he's got an MRI, or had an MRI today. I'm sure we'll get an update tomorrow. And everyone else was healthy, I think. There were some people, inside doing, regeneration and stuff like that, but essentially everyone else was out there and healthy, which is obviously good news because they were in a spot for a few weeks there.
Yeah,
and it was not
and
good.
Didn't get obliterated.
Yeah.
Beyond the one game we expected to be a challenge. And I do want to talk a little bit about the West for a minute.
Yeah,
but like
the subs have done well.
Yeah, I'll take a couple draws. Are they ideal? No. But you know what?
It's always hard to complain about away draws.
A point here and there, okay. You beat a team that's ahead of you, whether you think you should have done better or not, or scored more goals or whatever. Clean sheets, let's take them all day long. 4-0, 1-0. Does it really matter? Yes, in the goal differential discussion.
Yeah, but that's even the second tiebreaker.
Yeah.
At this point, you're not going to catch LAFC anyway on that one.
So couple things in the chat. Eileen, big shout out to Jordy Dellum.
Oof, yeah.
Wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah. not to go all hipstery, but I've been fairly high on him just because I like his skill set. He's super athletic, can move around, can crunch
Not
a
to
tackle.
go all hipstery, but
Well, this is
I
not to
had
say
a Jordy
yeah.
Dellum shirt from day one.
Day one. Yeah, right.
Cool. No, but legit good game.
Yeah, really good game.
And as someone who was like, I don't know where he fits, he's now actually playing a position he should be playing
He's
as
a
opposed
destroyer.
to them putting
He's a
him
destroyer,
elsewhere.
absolutely.
Exactly. And that's where, again, not that people can't adapt into other roles or positions, but
That's his,
you can
that's-
see the difference where he's like, nope, this is the job that I was told to have,
Yeah.
and this is the one that I'm comfortable in.
Yeah, I mean, he can play center back. Not nearly as good as.
But that's like Goose playing center back.
Yeah.
He can play center back. Should he or does he want to? Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot. This has been talked about to death, I'm sure. But obviously, the right back experiment was not a good one. But that was basically they were in emergency situation and they had no other options. And he wasn't good there. So you just have to kind of deal with. If you've got no one else to play there, someone's got to.
Did you tell him that you were the Mickey Turner?
I did not.
No.
I've not
Okay.
interviewed. But
Yeah.
he's been. I would say his performances on the whole have been equal to Svensson. Svensson is obviously a much superior passer and has more experience and kind of his
different,
position,
different player.
Yeah,
But
it's a
performance-wise, I get you.
difference.
Yeah.
They're- I would not say one performance has been necessarily better than the other. I think they've both been good for what they are. So it's just an interesting, juxtaposition. Thank you.
Yeah.
Between the two, and it'll make for some interesting decisions when they come back. I mean, I think Svensson will, I'm sure, come back into the starting lineup when he's healthy. But at least for Schmetzer, they've got obviously another option that they now know they can rely on, and they can maybe do a little bit more rotation between the two. And Svensson's getting up there in age, so it might not be a bad idea to get Jordy a few more games, and now they know they have someone they can rely on. So
Do you remember
it's gonna be
last year
great.
when we were like, how do we get the Sounders to kick the ball into the net? And this year we were like, how do we get Jordy Dellum enough minutes so that we can learn from his experience on the field?
That is not something we thought we would ever say. So
also, John brings up like he's officially worried about Marshall.
I would. Well, okay. So
Uh,
so this is not anything that the Sounders had said to me. That's just my kind of my take is that they're probably getting set to phase him out at this point. I do not think that. I think he understands what his role may be going forward, just because of his age and injury history, and his performance has been a little up and down. Now, some of that may be injury related, but
sure,
there's certainly some age issues there, and so that's obviously a good thing, a good reason they got Arriaga in. But if I am correct, and this is the start of something of a phase out, then having Arriaga here this summer is obviously a very good thing because they can start to weave him in, and then there's also the Roman Torres of it all because he is playing better for sure.
And I was just going to bring this up. I was like, he physically looks thinner.
Roman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Than like a month ago.
Okay, so
aside from like him cutting his hair and like how that changes the way your face is framed, he looks more cut up, and he looked pretty cut up before too.
Yeah, I mean,
but like he looked different the other day.
So a funny story. Someone told me that he's been in the gym basically nonstop over the last, say, 6 weeks, trying to, cut weight, get back to being fit for matches. And you can tell that he's been doing the work to get.
And he looks confident. Not that he isn't a confident guy, but there are times where he'd defer, and then there were times the other day where, like, again, a lot of center backs are about Rosie, like boot. A couple times, Fry at one point gave him a ball, and he just kind of looked around. And he's like, "Oh, I got 10 yards? Cool. let's go. And some of his placement when he has a hot second to like think about what he wants to do with the ball, like he's got that keeper backspin thing that he can put on some of those passes where like he hits a guy in the chest that he wanted to hit in the chest as opposed to just booting a ball up and out of the defensive zone. And I think you saw a slightly different level of confidence from him this week that we haven't necessarily seen in prior times that he's been in the lineup.
Yeah, he's definitely stepped up his performances, which is very good.
Which is great.
Yeah, good
I mean,
for
it's
him.
what you want for him.
Yeah, and he's got an option on his contract. I'm sure he wants it exercised, or he wants to go maybe this summer.
Run for president?
Yeah, I think he makes more doing this.
Let's be clear. Dude's getting elected.
Yeah,
it's going to happen.
Yeah, at some point, absolutely. But I think so he's got a contract option from what I've heard. And it's unlikely the Sounders are going to exercise it. But maybe this summer, depending on how Marshall and Arriaga do, maybe at that point he's like, well, why don't you trade me somewhere where I can get that option exercised and where I can be a full-time starter. And we'll see what happens this summer. But, again, his recent performances will certainly do wonders for his trade value and just value overall. And the Sounders are certainly happy about it because they're getting a player who can adequately cover for Chad, and potentially may have some trade value or sell value over the summer. I mean, it's not going to be anything huge, but maybe they get a couple $100,000 of allocation money, or maybe $500,000 in a sale.
And I think we knew that Kim would change the dynamic, but I think a lot of us felt like it was going to be Chad and Kim show. And now you're like, oh, it's the Kim and Arriaga show, maybe. And they happen to have another person, which hopefully isn't named Jonathan Campbell. Sorry, Jonathan Campbell. I mean, good job making the 18-ish. It's going to be interesting, like second half of this year and into next year, like what that defensive, that back four really looks like. I think you might see a different place.
There could be a lot of changes this summer, and that's again another good reason why they got these deals done over the line now.
Yeah.
Even if it's going to cost them some additional TAM and cap space over the short term, they've gotten two replacements in for whatever happens, and the caps are likely to go up next year anyway. So, I know Garth was joking about hoping that
is that after the player strike?
Yeah. It was sometime in July when the new collective bargaining agreement gets signed.
Nice.
July of 2020. I should
Wow.
be clear.
Cool.
Yeah. So,
so we're
going to
go
6-month break.
We're going to go to the EPL schedule.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. It was good for them to get those pieces in. And there's obviously the other thing if they waited to do these deals, maybe the $1 million transfer fee for Arriaga turns into a $2 million transfer fee, and then the deal's not doable this summer. And then same for Jones on a lesser degree. They didn't pay much to get him over here, but or maybe Jones blows up during the Gold Cup, or Arriaga does something down in South America, and then they cannot afford to pay him at all because they get sold to some championship side for $5 million. So all of that's been to the good, and we'll just have to wait and see how they deal with it. But it's kind of first world problems, really, to me.
This is really confusing to me because it's May, right? Aren't we supposed to be like super shitty right now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I did, by the way, send my shitty tweet last night after Danny from Sounders tweeted like, this is what day it was over the last 4 years that the Sounders had this many points. And I was like, oh, but it's fake news that the Sounders had slow starts. Cool. That's interesting. No. We don't need to necessarily recap the last handful of matches, but draw. Again, take your points, if you will. am okay with the point away at Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean,
The San Jose thing was not great.
well, yeah, I mean,
Depending on your perspective, I guess. But
yeah, you take, again, that one has some extenuating circumstances in that they went down 2 goals. But, of course, you went down 2 goals at home to San Jose, who was mediocre at best, even though they've been playing a little better recently. And then the LAFC home game, they go down to
you mean the away
early.
match that happened to be played
yes.
at CenturyLink Field?
Yes, yeah. That Ted Uncles, he's had a little bit of a bad time over the last few weeks. So you had that game, which had extenuating circumstances too, but at the end of the day, you end up with only 3 points from 9, even if one of them's a road game, and it wasn't great. The San Jose game, they even down 2 goals, they should have probably put 4 past them at the end of the game, but of course San Jose had many other chances as well. I mean, I think that was just them just having some major defensive breakdowns, and just it just was one of those games where they just were just all over the place. And then the LAFC game, you go down a man and you hold them to no goals over 80 minutes. What else are you supposed to? What else are you supposed
I'll
to say?
take it.
Yeah, I mean they could have won, but of course LAFC could have won that game too. So, I mean, it was an unfortunate series of games. They got points, and if they win on Wednesday, they're poised to leapfrog LA Galaxy on points, and they'll be in second place all by themselves and within shouting distance of LAFC. So, all things considered, you're not gonna win every single home game. So, if they keep this trajectory, they'll be pretty good at the end of the year. 5-0-2 at home. You extrapolate that out. That's you're doing all right.
But like weird week.
Yeah.
Wednesday, you play the team that's 18th.
Yeah.
In the Shield standings. And then Saturday, you play the number 2 team in the league.
Yeah, Philly. They've turned it around. Which
I don't know if I really can say how did that happen, because we all should have sort of seen the formative behavior happening.
Yeah, they've not been terrible. They've just not been great, and they don't sign DPs.
But to hold
their
it
owner's
together
cheap.
for a number of months, that's hard. And DC, no slouch right now. So it's an interesting thing to see that let's call it the Red Bulls DC dynamic was the thing for a long time out there.
Oh, yeah.
And this Philly DC thing, if Philly could be good, might actually be just as much juice, because the contrived bullshit that is New York is red, New York is blue can die in a fire.
Yeah, it's pretty.
That was started on purpose
aggravated.
in order to make the cameras look good. Like, you ever see those things with the trash cans on fire, and then there's a bunch of photographers just laying down around it in order to get this cool photo. When meanwhile it's total bullshit. That's the Red Bulls NYCFC rivalry, which they could give a fuck about one another. The Philly DC thing,
it has some potential.
Has some potential. Yeah. I think it's interesting.
And they've been Philly. That has been very good to start the year, and they've done it kind of the Red Bulls way, in as much as they've not spent on DPs. Farfan's their first major spend, really. And then they've just been kind of building up the farm system. And again, to be somewhat fair to them, they started in 2011 from scratch, literally from scratch. They had nothing. They had a supporters group that basically got that team in there, and then they have a stadium in a terrible location, an owner who was too poor to do anything, and so they basically.
Do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yes, and also they they poured all the resources into their youth development, which has turned out to be a fantastic idea, as the Sounders are now learning. And so, they're going to be a very tough test, especially because we don't know how the Sounders are going to be able to match up with them just as far as roster rotation is concerned. Because you got to take the Wednesday game and make sure you win that one. You just have to. Yep, a very mediocre Orlando team who has like no discipline whatsoever, questionable coaching, and the most disliked player in the league in Dom Dwyer.
I'm just going to interrupt you. Very mediocre.
Yes. I'm trying to emphasize the mediocreness with which they exude.
Wow.
Exude. Yes.
Okay. We're gonna talk words later. No. Gotta win on Wednesday. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Bring it.
Mm-hmm.
Would love to get out of town, riding pretty high.
Like I said, second place all by yourself, and just ready to, try to get a result in Philly.
For sure,
that will be a very tough game for them to win. I think they, if on a full week they match up very good very well against Philly, but they're not going to be on a full rest week, and it's a cross country trip essentially.
Right. But as matches go, and I'm just peeking at the West, so. Galaxy and LAFC have both played 12. Do they play Wednesday?
Galaxy play Thursday.
Okay.
LAFC plays Thursday.
All right.
Galaxy do not play.
Okay. So catching up to one, make a little bit of a move. Colorado came up in the chat, and
oof, why?
Like in the West, there's a team in the top with a plus 21 goal differential after 12 matches.
Yeah.
And there's a team with, I actually don't care about the minus 14. That's not as bad as I would have thought. But they have 0.18 points per game.
That's
which is like
possibly bad.
Super dismal.
Yeah, I think the year that DC set the points record or the low points record, I think they won 3 games the entire year. And somehow Colorado's on a pace to beat that with 0 wins, which is absolutely incredible. But the thing is that at the beginning of the year, they looked like they were going to be okay, in as much as a team that gets a bunch of 33-year-olds can be. But at least they're proven MLS players, and they already got rid of one of them in Benny Feilhaber because. They should probably have just committed to a youth movement from the start. I mean, they have Tim Howard, who they can't get rid of because, it's the last year of his deal and they're paying him either way. So why, sunk costs and all that. But, bringing in Kai Kamara and Feilhaber, I mean, they were basically playing to be 9th place in the West. And that's if everything went right.
Right. And
now things have not gone right, and they're looking at being last in the West or in MLS. And then you've signed a bunch of guys to $600,000 contracts, who you have no ability to sell for anything significant. But that's kind of where they are. So they made their bed. So I guess the good thing from them is that all of their DB deals are off the books next year. So no more Howard, Shelskin, Gashi, who they cut but are still paying for some bizarre reason. He's off the books, and Jack Smith or something or other, he'll be off the books too. So they'll have a buttload of cap and likely allocation money. So they'll be able to remake their team, and they did pick up a couple good pieces, but that was not a very smart decision on their part.
It's an interesting point, and I can't say I remember a time in the last few years where Vancouver, Portland, and SKC were all really far below the line. Not great.
Yeah.
5.3 points because of this 7th place thing for SKC. They especially, I'm like, wow, what happened there?
I mean, you got to say that's 99% of that is injuries. Vancouver obviously is a tire fire off the field, which we could.
What do you mean, Mickey?
Well, since their supporters groups keep walking out every game, that doesn't seem to be a good sign. And Portland, as much as we probably hate to admit it, they'll be fine once they get into their new digs. Yeah.
We're not going to talk about Portland right now. Scusa.
Yeah. But I think Vancouver will be I mean, I think they have some decent talent, but I don't know. It's just their off the field issues could consume that team,
Yeah.
and it's already fractured the fan base, and they've already lost a lot of the fan base. And I haven't seen anything to say that they're going to be doing anything to try to solve the situation. Matt Pence has a story coming out for The Athletic, which is going to dig deep into that. So if you don't have the Athletic subscription, I suggest you get one.
Buy it.
Yeah. So I won't spoil it any more than that, obviously, because it's his piece. But it's just, they handled that terribly from the start back in 2008 and have, what's the saying? It's not the crime, it's the cover-up. And they just haven't been willing to be forthcoming and remorseful in any serious way since then. I mean, this is kind of like PR 101 stuff. They've just decided to bunker in and hope it goes away, and it is just not going to work, especially on a delicate subject to say such as this. So they've made their own bed, and they just don't seem to want to do anything to change their current trajectory. I don't know why, personally. There seems like there's a solution to this issue, but they don't want to, for whatever reason.
They're trying to be real nice about everything forever. I honestly think there's something to people just think stuff's going to go away.
Mm-hmm. I think that's
in general, in this world. And I'm like, have you been to, I don't know, Earth today?
Yeah.
Have you been to Twitter for like a 20-minute period? Yeah. Because it's not going away.
I know. Mm-hmm.
So
it's one of the funny, when I occasionally do criminal cases, or back in the day when I was doing prosecuting cases, you send out warrants to people who they don't show up for their cases, and it's one of those things they were just like, well, if I just ignore it, maybe they'll dismiss the case. It's like, no, that's not how this works.
I mean, that totally makes sense.
That's not how this works. The case doesn't go away if you just leave it alone for 2 years. The evidence still stays there. Maybe a witness or two is gone, but the warrant is still out there, and it's going to stay out there, and you're going to get arrested at some point. And so you might as well just come in and deal with it. But you'd be surprised at the number of people who just, their reasoning is, well, I just didn't want to deal with it. It's like, all right, well, you can sit in jail for 6 weeks.
I'd like to have a life like that, where I'm like, I'm just not going to deal with whatever X is.
Yeah.
My left front tire is super flat, but I'm just going to keep driving down the road. It's going to be fine.
It's
it's literally not.
Yeah, you pay now or you pay later, and usually when you pay later, it's a lot more than it is now. So,
and I think that's the case where you're talking about front office or on-field stuff, but frankly, like decision making in Vancouver, for instance. Like stuff I've heard just talking to supporters up there, like knowing some folks online, their on-field decisions in some cases and their off-field decisions seem to track, actually, which is weird. There's a little bit of a, it'll be fine. No, it'll be fine. Yeah. You're like, no, it's literally not at all fine. And then 3 years later, or 10 years later, you know, in the case we're talking about, nothing has changed. So did you not learn? Do you think you're invincible? Is Canada just easy? Like, what's going on?
Well, on the field, they've not really spent any money.
They had Brek Shea, though.
Yeah. Well, yes, there's that.
There's that
that gem of the decision. But they don't spend on DPs. Montero's probably the most expensive one they've ever had. And I assume this is probably his last year there. Unless he takes a pay cut, which he might. I mean, he may want to still keep playing. And he's made a lot of money, so maybe that happens. But again, you still don't have a high price DP either way, and that's just not been their method of operation. And especially, let's keep in mind that they got $15 million for selling Alphonso Davies, and I think they got to keep all of that because of the change in the homegrown player rules.
I think they're doing that.
So they've got
Breaking Bad scene where dude lays down on like the bed of money in the storage unit.
Is this a DuckTales thing? Are you swimming in your vault of money?
It's like that, except with less loonies and toonies. It's just dollars, and you just lay on them and are fascinated by the fact that, like, you could just throw one of them in the air and set it on fire, and it wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
Just generally speaking, because you can't spend it.
Yeah. And again, so a question that probably should be asked of them is what they're doing with that $15 million, payment that they received from Bayern Munich for Davies. Are they going out and spending it on a high-priced DP, a big transfer fee? You have to spend it on soccer-related reasons. So the owners just can't pocket it, as far as we know.
I mean,
MLS
soccer-related reasons could be like they're supplementing the prices at the pint a couple blocks away. So like beers are $4.50 instead of $5. Like, it's related to soccer. It could be that.
Yeah, it's possible, but again,
JJ says maple syrup, by the way.
It is a good investment. But yeah, so what have they done with that $15 million? And it's a question that I don't think's really been answered recently.
It's in Gringotts.
Yeah. Well, there's that too. But yeah, so I don't know. But that seems like a question that some enterprising reporter should probably put to them at this point.
You are an enterprising reporter.
Yeah, but I'm not Canadian. They're probably not going to take my calls.
I mean, they might.
Yeah.
Just spoof the number and have it come from like a Vancouver
considering
number.
they're banning their Vancouver reporters.
Different discussion.
Hey, I don't know.
But
That might be a worse outcome for me.
So it's about 8:40. We don't necessarily need to hash out any of the other stuff about the previous 4 matches, but let's look at Wednesday.
Yeah.
Injury-wise, anything we should be focused on or worried about?
I would say
Dom Dwyer's injured?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was distracted for a moment.
Yeah.
Oh,
he's always on the verge of getting suspended.
I am all for that. Yeah. Were I to sacrifice my body for anything, it would be to hurt Dom Dwyer. Just in general.
So that's the interesting question is a comment back in the gallery was that his Dwyer's wife is pregnant. Not that would stop him from coming to the game, but I'm not sure who Orlando's playing on Friday or this weekend. But Tom can maybe look that up. But that's a long ass trip for Orlando after having played.
No
Sunday.
one cares. They play Sunday at 3. It's Ohio's Eastern, right?
Eastern.
So 3 p.m. Sunday in Cincinnati.
Are you sure that? No, it looks like it's in Orlando.
Oh, no, it is. I'm sorry. You're right. So they're going to fly direct home.
Oh, yes.
They're going to fly direct home Thursday.
Yeah. So, okay. So that, that's better for them. Obviously, they don't have another road game to go. But that's a long trip to get out here on short rest because he played on Sunday this past week.
And they're going to fly all day Thursday.
Yeah. So what are the odds that they're bringing a full complement of players? It's pretty low because, again, this is a cross-conference conference game. So I could easily see them bringing something of a B team / skeleton crew out here. Nani, who was easily their most dangerous player, didn't play on the weekend, is probably not going to play in Seattle. So that's obviously to the benefit of the Sounders, but we'll see. I don't have any inside information. That's just my speculation. So it's going to be likely a somewhat skeleton crew with the B team of sorts because they probably want to go into Cincinnati, who's a rival, or not a rival, but at least they play the same conference. Is
Cincinnati a rival to anyone, though?
Columbus or Nashville when they come in, maybe.
Okay.
So they're likely to focus on the Cincy game.
So will we see Will Johnson?
Oof. Well, they got to bring someone out, so I'm going to say yes. I'm sure he'd like to get out to the Northwest and try to stick it to the Sounders. So I would say yes, because again, they got you need at least 11 players. But
that's super positive.
Yes. So yeah, I think it's a game that they should win comfortably because the Sounders will likely have most of their starting lineup in there. Because again, you gotta win your home games.
All right, so we're here. Prediction.
I'll say I'll say 4-1. I think the Sounders come out guns blazing and try to put the stamp on the game early, and obviously that would have the benefit of, if they do so, being able to maybe move some guys out of the lineup and get them some rest ahead of a long road trip. So I think we're going to see what they've typically started quickly this year. The degree to which they've gotten the goal that they deserved has varied, but I think I could see them getting a couple of goals in the first 30 minutes, and then trying to get the third one to to put the game to bed. So that's how I would see it going. Again, the only injury issues are Svensson and Marshall. I'm fairly skeptical that Marshall plays on Wednesday. I think they would try to maybe, again, what you're looking at is, do you want him having a full week of rest, additional week of rest, but having to fly out to Philly?
Right.
Or playing him on short rest here and giving him the Philly game off so you don't have to, saddle him with two cross-country flights in a short amount of time, especially coming off a bum knee, but giving him the full week of rest, and he gets to play on grass. So my thought is that he probably doesn't play on Wednesday, and they see what happens then. Because, of course, the other problem is you can't you're going to have Roman Torres play 3 games in a week. That seems like a not very good idea, even with his improved fitness. That's a lot of miles that he'd be logging.
Yeah, they need to split the difference a little bit there.
And I'm not sure who else. I mean, Spence is not available, so you're looking at Dellum or Campbell as your center back in one of those games. And are you going to have Kim Ki-hee play 3 games in a week? There's
so what
another
you're saying
issue.
is we're going to play 3 back. And
they might. They're going to have to. It's going to be that Philly game. I could see being very creative as far as the roster is concerned.
I mean, that's a very specific word.
Yes.
Okay.
Creative. Yeah, I think. Well, again, they're unfortunately injured at a place where you need some flexibility or some depth, and they don't have that depth at the moment, or at least the depth that they have. Again, Jonathan Campbell is not something that they're going to rely on or want to rely on. But
I mean, we could use depth in quotes.
Yes.
He's probably going to beat the shit out of me in the alley outside of the Berliner tonight. It's going to end poorly for Tom.
Yeah.
I'm going to say 3-0. Mm-hmm. I'm sticking with that.
Yeah, I think it's more likely that they get a shutout than score 4 goals, probably, which was my prediction. Just because I think Orlando's, if the lineup is as we think it may be, then they'll probably be pretty hapless, and so it would take something
what do you think
unusual to get it.
What do you think about Saturday?
Oh yeah, so that's going to be. I think that's going to be a problem. I mean, I think they're fine. They have enough to rotate basically everywhere, except center back. And you're looking at the prospect of having either Torres or Kim Ki-hee playing 3 games in a week. I mean, I'm sure Kim Ki-hee could handle it, but and he's probably going to have to because they don't have the options. So I think Campbell or Dellum probably is going to start one of those games at center back. If Torres can go all 3 games, that would be an incredible bonus. But again, you're risking injury at that point more than you probably you want to.
Yeah.
So that's going to make that game very tough because Philly is flying at the moment, and they're probably they're going to want to make a statement, especially if the Sounders win. Then they're going to be near the top of the Western Conference.
For sure.
Philly's going to see that as the opportunity to say, "Hey, we've arrived. We can play with the big boys." Unfortunately, the Sounders may not have their big boy lineup fully intact for that game. So it's really tough to see. If they have a lot of rotation, then I don't really see the Sounders coming away with the victory. So I would say that seems like one of those 2-1 losses. Maybe Philly scores a goal late to make it 3-1.
That's super optimistic of you.
Yeah. I mean, if they had more rotation at the center back position, then I'd feel more confident about them maybe going in and getting a result. Because in the midfield, the depth has been very good, and they've performed well. Ship, Wana, and Dellum and so it's just, Saad Abdul Salam was very good in his start. Maybe they play him at center back, even though he's been exclusively training at right back and playing at right back, I think. So it's a tough game to see him coming away with a result.
I hesitate to want a mix and match situation. I think if it's Dellum, like known quantity, he's done it before, in a pinch or in a situation like one time, okay with it, especially without Goose, most likely, or we don't know.
I would say most likely. I don't see it.
Yeah, I don't know if I make any other swaps at that position. It's just such a risk at center back right now, and you can't have everyone either playing too many matches in a row, or like people who haven't been playing stepping in.
So, question: what if we cycle on Wednesday? That is, so there you're basically, you're not really risking, but obviously there's a chance if you do not play a first choice team on Wednesday, that you maybe don't get the result you need, but you should have enough with your depth to get a result regardless.
Well, you can also start a couple of your bench players. Yeah. Like
maybe you start
stack the 18, so it works out.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
Again, up top, I'm not worried for the Sounders or in the midfield. It's exclusively at the back.
But you don't want to
center back.
You don't want to have a 4-3 match on a Wednesday night. Like that's exhausting.
Yeah.
Versus a bad team.
Like,
it just doesn't make sense. But I don't know.
You're risking a lot to try to get a result in Philly if that's the case.
Right.
Because you end up maybe not getting what you want out of Orlando. This kind of happened with the was it? I think it might have been. Yeah, it was Philly last year when they scored at the Sounders lost to the midweek on a last-minute goal. Then they went down to L.A. and got killed, and so they got nothing out of either of those games. And they didn't rest anybody for either game, and so they were pretty exhausted. So it's a tough decision. If it were me, you go for the sure thing. And then you do what you can in Philly, and if you lose the game, then you weren't going to win the rest of them anyway. So
before we hop off, and it's 8:53 Pacific, U.S. Open Cup. We haven't really talked about beyond like speculating about Tacoma or not.
Still have not gotten an answer on
round
that.
2 starts tomorrow, I believe.
Yes, tomorrow and Wednesday. So lots of games.
It's going to come up real fast. Round 4.
Yeah. And I've asked the Sounders about where they're going to play this round 4. They know the answer. They have not told me the answer yet.
We should text Dave Clark.
Yeah, it's possible he knows the answer. I know the Sounders do. It's a little interesting that they haven't announced that yet because we are about a month out. So I do not, again, they have not deigned to provide that information at this point. Is that another big word?
Deigned?
Yes.
That's a good word.
Thank you. Yeah. If I had to guess, it's Tacoma. It from their perspective, it makes a lot of sense. But they have not. They've not answered that question yet.
For the record, there are red-haired people doing fire emoji here in the audience.
I like the jazz hands on the.
And I don't even know what to say right now. If we were to, I would bet Tacoma.
Yes.
Were I to bet,
Yeah.
I actually love the concept. Don't want that. I think it is a huge miss. And it's the same huge miss I said a month ago when we talked about this last time. I think they're not managing expectations at all.
I think that is an excellent point. You recall when they first announced all of the name change and all that stuff.
Do you guys like?
Yes.
This is, by the way, Starfire complaining in the background with the choo-choo.
Yeah. So, when they first announced the name change and all that stuff, all right, and now they're just doing it on purpose.
We'll just sit here.
Yeah.
The train show, everyone.
Yeah. Is there someone on the tracks? Because there's
I'm
no
not
reason
doing
for
that.
that, really.
I'm going to learn sign
Yeah. We close caption
in
this.
my spare time.
All right, I think we're done. So yeah, they announced with the name change that they expected everyone to make the playoffs, or expected the team to compete for the playoffs. That has obviously not happened. They, on the business side of things, I don't know that they promised anything per se, but they talked about how much of a boon this would be, and neither of those things have come to pass at this point. It is a question that definitely should be asked of the front office, what they see going forward for a team that is not likely to compete, not to win the USL championship, because I think that's, generally speaking, an unreasonable expectation. But a reasonable expectation is for them to be much better than they are.
Yeah.
And to compete much harder than they are. And they are simply not doing that, even if they are missing a few of their stud players who, even when they were there, weren't necessarily doing all that much to improve their prospects. So Garth said in an interview recently, I think after the U17s won the whatever cup they won, the GA Cup, that essentially everyone knows that they're a development team to feed the first team, which
Right.
I think everyone is essentially on board with. And so he said basically something to the effect of, well, even if they don't win another game, at least if they're making progress towards feeding the first team, that's a good thing, and that's sure. But I don't see how you're going to get people out to the stadium to watch, the Defiance lose 3-1 or 4-1 or 4-0 every week. And I'm
Weird.
I'm just curious what the city of Tacoma thinks about this, and the Rainiers for that matter, because there is a new stadium that is under consideration. They're doing the impacts on that to make sure it's economically feasible. Well, is it economically feasible if you're averaging 1,200 people a game in what would then be a 5,000 seat soccer only stadium? I don't know. I mean, with the rain, obviously they're going to draw much better than that, and you have an extra tenant, so maybe you can use the Defiance as a loss leader to some degree to fill some extra dates. But I mean, it's just not a good situation, and it's a little confusing as to why, because there are other USL teams that are parented by MLS teams that are doing much better than the Sounders are, with prospects that aren't any better than the Sounders. Right. I mean, the T2, they don't have anybody who's a grade A prospect necessarily. They've dropped down a couple of Timbers players, but they're I think they're third in the USL right now. And then the Swope Park SKC's team, the Red Bulls 2 have historically been good.
Stay Swope.
Yeah, stay Swope. Those teams have been historically good and made the playoffs, and I think the Red Bulls 2 has won a couple of championships, or at least one. And so,
the approach at its core is different
between
how Sounders approach Defiance and how other clubs approach their USL side. Like frankly, the way Sounders stock S1 is different, especially in the first half of the year. And maybe right now we're at this crux or turning point with a couple of the moves that have just been made in the last week and a half.
Yeah.
That, we're looking at it in a way that's similar to how the rest of the league is doing.
Yeah.
So maybe this is the transition year. Mm-hmm. There's a brand, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, they've established.
But the part that I struggle with in general is I feel like expectations are not managed.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And you can't go, well, I don't know why people would ever show up to watch a team get spanked 3-1 every week. But also, look at our team. You can't do, but is it free? Because if it is, then look at our team.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me. The logic seems flawed.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I agree wholeheartedly. I was just trying to think because what they do or what they have been doing with the Defiance is obviously stocking it with a bunch of kids who are not ready for that level at this point. They've got, and to be fair, they started this out in 2015 and they stocked it with a bunch of 24-year-olds, squeaked into the playoffs and then lost. But
Yeah.
it wasn't. Is that going to do anything for you? No. And so I think they were well within their rights to decide to make a change to get these young kids in there, knowing that they would suffer some losses. The problem was that they did it probably too early because they didn't have the player pool to draw from their academy or from scouting or whatever, or from the Sounders, and they decided not to bring a bunch of Sounders down to be competitive. And they're getting closer to that point.
Or Will Bruin and Roman Torres are playing every week for Defiance, and it's going to be amazing.
That would be fantastic. But those are some high level players. Even for MLS,
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's not. And they keep their roster intentionally small so they can make adjustments during the season and during the transfer windows in case there's windows, and they can pay the top 18 a little bit more money. So they're not adding a bunch of filler players who they can loan down to the Defiance every week to play.
It just doesn't track, like, the cost to go doesn't track with the players on the field, which doesn't track to the way they market.
Yeah.
So until I think they figure all that out, and the thing that's frustrating to me is, like, Rainiers are world class isn't the right word because baseball is is a USA primarily sport. Obviously, they play in DR and Mexico and parts of Asia and whatnot, but like as the business goes, it's a lot of United States.
Yeah.
Rainiers are known coast to coast as good marketers and strategists and like salespeople and whatnot. And the disconnect between Defiance and Rainiers is like Grand Canyon-esque, in my opinion, from like the cost to attend and the product on the field. Like if you want to be really blunt about it.
Yeah, I don't know what their economics are on that and why they charge what they charge.
It's to pay for the thing where they take the mound off the field and then replace it.
Yes, and the Gorilla Sacks, dry cleaning for the Gorilla Sack suit as well.
So anyway.
But maybe they have a rethink after this year and make some adjustments to those prices.
They'll get there at some point. Yeah. It is what it is, and I think we all have to be, as is mentioned in the chat. I think we should all feel good about Academy.
Oh yes,
and
absolutely.
where that is going.
Absolutely.
And ultimately, if the Academy's good at 13-year-olds and at 17-year-olds, then Defiance is definitely going to be good as the bridge between USL and MLS.
Yeah, maybe one of the options is that they drop down to USL 1. That's not – I asked them about that last year, and they said there was really no difference in cost between the two, so why go down?
But is it about that?
Well, the other question is there a real difference in skill level?
Well, that's the question, though. There's also very much haves and have-nots in the top tier of USL. Like, there are a handful of teams that are just
Louisville, Phoenix, Sacramento. And so, I don't know. Those are all questions we definitely should ask them, and we will.
So
forward.
We ran a little hot.
Yep.
Thanks, Mickey Turner.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, everybody, for watching, listening, whatever you're doing. Thanks, folks, here at the Berliner Pub in downtown Renton. Thanks, hecklers that sit over at their table over there. Thanks, Berliner.
We'll be back next week.
Oh, JJ wants to make sure that we touched on this Bruce Arena to the Revs in every position ever. I think he's going to probably be the primary ticket taker as well at the front door.
Will probably get their money's worth out of New England, but that they had to fire their Frida was
fire everyone.
He was ridiculous, and then Mike Burns, who was the GM, was he was ineffective and was a terrible spokesman, and had the results spoke for themselves, and so I was a little surprised they got rid of him because he seemed to be pretty well entrenched, and the Crafts don't really care enough to do anything else. But I think the pressure is finally getting to them. There's national pressure on them to turn things around, especially given the lack of success in the Boston market, the lack of
Boston.
yes, the New England
You
market.
just said Boston market.
Yes. Oh, yeah, and so yeah, it was. I'm a little surprised, pleasantly surprised that they took some action. But their next move is to if they get Arena in, that his record speaks for itself, notwithstanding his last game for the national team. And so they'll have the coaching and executives in place. They need to do a lot more with marketing and figure out what they're going to do with the stadium situation, because aside from promising that they're getting close every August when season ticket renewals come around, they haven't really gotten anything. But there are some rumors that they're getting close, so we'll see. Because again, much like Chicago, that's a New England / Boston is a market that MLS definitely
has to get right.
Yeah.
So anyway, we can get into Bruce Arena and jokes on that front in the future.
Yes.
Thanks for a good show. Good
Absolutely.
times.
Yep.
We will see you, next week.
Yep.
We're actually
End
going to
of
have a
May.
show 2 weeks in a row.
Yes.
What is that
unless
about?
People get too hungover and wino away or arrested.
I mean, that's probably going to happen. Wino away. Go to Yakima. See you Saturday. Good night.